Hello, friends. Hello, brothers. This is Justin with Masonic Improvement with my latest installation in my Faces of Freemasonry series. Before we get started, I do want to point out my little disclaimer, as always, that neither myself nor my guest are representative of our Grand Lodge or our lodge. Our opinions are our own and are not necessarily those of either entity. That said, it is my pleasure to introduce Brother Sean Rothberg. Sean, before you get started, I do want to point out that Sean and I have only spoken briefly in the past. We had a short conversation a few days ago, and it reminded me of a Masonic quote, and it is, there are no strangers in Freemasonry, only friends you have not met yet. Me and Sean hit it off pretty good, and so I have been very excited and looking forward to this. Sean?
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Like I said, this is we only spoke briefly, and it was a really good conversation. And I wanted to, as much as I wanted to keep the conversation going, part of me was also saying, we need to hold this off because it was one of those conversations where it could have went on for quite a while, and I wanted to save it for the interview. So I really appreciate you coming on here, Sean.
Thanks, Justin.
So,
thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from Dallas, Texas. I'm 32 years old. I've been a Mason for 6 years, and I've held several offices at my lodge, Richardson 1214 in Richardson, Texas. And that's my Masonic part.
Are you holding the offices right now?
Sadly, no. I stepped out of line just so I can focus on school because I'm at University of Texas at Dallas getting a bachelor's degree in English literature.
Very cool. What's your goal with that? You're going to...
My goal is eventually get my bachelor's, become a high school teacher, because apparently I have no brains because high school teachers don't have brains.
I used to be a high school teacher, right?
Oh, my condolences. My condolences. What subject?
Do what?
What subject?
Physics.
My condolences.
Yeah, it was something, all right. But more power to you, especially now if you want to get an education with it's just I stepped out about 2 years ago, and I couldn't imagine being a teacher this past school year, and really not even knowing what the next year is going to be like, honestly. So
I have friends who are teachers. My next door neighbor is a high school science teacher, engineering. And it's a great, especially in right now, with the interview being in 2020, everything going on, teachers have, they have stability in their careers. If you're a teacher, you can just move online. And that's a great thing. Eventually, after my bachelor's, I'm looking at getting a master's in history of ideas with Holocaust certification, and see where that goes. Because I love to write, I love to read, and that's a great thing.
So you bring up something that's interesting I hadn't considered before, is that before everything was kind of forced to be online, and I don't know the longevity of this, how long we're going to have to do things online, but if we do in the foreseeable future, normally if you want to teach, you have to live pretty close to your school, right?
Right.
But really, if there's more stuff moved online, there's nothing stopping you from seeking out schools that actually pay decently for a teacher.
Yeah.
Just teaching online from wherever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about what brought you to the fraternity.
That's a funny story. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I was in a relationship and I broke up with her over religious differences. I am Jewish, and I was heading toward the Orthodoxy, and she wasn't. And my dad was also a Mason, and I've always loved conspiracy theories. We all love them, because I used to think, I always thought they were stupid, but they're fun to read about.
Yeah.
Earth is flat, reptilians, all that fun stuff. So I broke up with her, and I wanted something to keep me occupied. and I knew a guy. My family has a bar in Richardson, and we had a customer who was a past master of a lodge, and he told me to come to his lodge. So I looked it up, and I saw it was 2 minutes from where I worked. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see where it is.
Mhm.
And I went to that lodge. I saw cars. I walked in, and everyone's like, "Oh, nice to meet you." So I walked in and was welcome. I had my yarmulke on. I had the Orthodox strings that are called sitzes
Mhm.
out, and yeah. So I joined, and I told my dad about it, and he says, "Awesome." So he was actually there for my EA degree.
So it was a different lodge than your dad then.
It was a different lodge. My dad was raised in James Lad Burgess,
Mhm.
and I was raised in Richardson. But when I was eventually raised, my dad actually uh, he was there.
That's
So
that's very cool. So you're a does that mean you're a second generation Mason or?
I am technically second generation raised Mason.
Mhm.
My dad told me his dad, who I was named after, was an EA, but didn't go through to the raising.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, still a Mason though, right?
Still, well, EA, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's very cool. So that I have a question for you.
And I have
So
an answer.
as far as the yarmulke goes, because I've seen this question asked before, but I never have seen the answer. And I know that this is just going to apply to Texas because every jurisdiction is different. But as far as wearing a yarmulke in lodge, what's
It,
the
it, it does not conflict with anything.
okay?
Ritual hair dress is what it would be under,
Hmm.
and it does not conflict to the worshipful master.
Okay. I didn't think it would, but I was always curious. So that's
I
good.
was curious myself, honestly,
Yeah.
because I
So
didn't know. Like, do I take it off? Do I show my horns? I mean, like, what about that? That's conspiracy theory.
yeah.
So
I used to follow I was actually Freemason at this time, but I followed quite a few conspiracies. I used to go to some of their forums, and it was entertaining. It was fun to read, And some of it's just pretty convincing. And then until they start tying it around to the Freemasons, like, wait a second, like we can't even agree on what color lights we want to use. We're definitely not
we can't even agree if we want to have mac and cheese or green beans for a
there. You go.
side dish.
Or just
Which
mix them
one?
together.
I know it's down a whole rabbit hole, but which ones were you going on?
Which websites?
Yeah,
Um.
because I know there was a big conspiracy theorist who passed away this year, who lived in Austin, Tex Mars. He,
Jim Mars, right?
it's his brother,
Oh, his
Tex Mars,
brother.
Teeks or Tex, and he was anti-Mason, anti-Jewish, anti-NWO, anti-everything, unless it's Protestant evangelical Christianity.
See, I used to. Oh, so the website I used to go to, I assume I
Mhm.
could probably talk about it. I don't even know if it's still around anymore. It was abovetopsecret.com, right?
Mhm.
And I guess his brother, Jim Mars,
Yeah.
that's the reason the name kind of rung a bell. He was actually banned from that website because he was posting when his crap's too nutty to go on a website like that. He's nuts, right? And no, he was talking about the same thing. He was like, there's like apparently the craziest thing I ever heard was the reptilians. They built a soul catcher on the moon, and
That sounds like Scientology.
is it?
No, it
I,
sounds like
oh,
Scientology with Soul Catcher and all that.
I have no idea, and I'm just listening to this guy. And he sounds like he believes it, and there's people that do believe it, but I guess it keeps us from doing our spiritual cycle or whatever. And I guess it's like a giant dream catcher or something. I have no idea.
I don't know if you've had it, but I've actually walked out of a grocery store and of course as a Mason, we always have to have auto emblems all over our car,
Obviously, yeah.
obviously. And I was walking out and I unlocked my car and the guy said, "Is this your car?" I was like, "Yeah." "Are you a Mason?" "Yeah." And just yelled the F word. And I was like, "Thank you. I've always wanted to meet you crazy people."
That's like a rite
And
of
he said,
passage.
"You worship the devil," and I went, "Jewish." And he's like, "You don't know what you worship." And he kept going on and on. And I was like, "Thank you. I've always wanted to meet you people." And
So,
it was
so
the funniest thing.
I mean, being raised and everything, that's a very important step in being a Freemason. But even being a past master, I mean, that's some people feel like that's a very significant step. But you haven't really earned your stripes until somebody flips you off and cusses you out in the parking lot for being a Freemason. That's when you are 100%. You have earned it at that point. No,
I had to post that on the Facebook groups and everything. And
oh
they
yeah,
were like, "Oh, wait till you're like 10 more years, 20 more years, and you'll get like 2, 3, and they'll keep adding up."
yeah. I I'm one of those kind of guys where I don't I don't have anything on my car. For one, my
Mhm.
wife hates stickers on the car. She doesn't want anything on the car anyway. But I don't have anything on my car, and I don't even wear. Well, there's a reason for it. I don't wear any rings or anything either.
Okay.
Mainly because they just don't. I have two, and neither one of them fit me right now, and I just never got around to getting another one. But I've never really been big, just because I don't know. I don't like drama, and I know nutty people are dramatic, so I try to avoid them at all costs. You know, just kind of keep it low key. But, you know, I always thought it was interesting because you see it everywhere. If you ever go to my channel, right, and you look at some of the comments, especially on some of the more popular videos, the nut jobs really come out. I mean, they come out in force. And the biggest argument I've always seen is, yeah, kind of like what you're saying. Like, we're low level Masons, so we don't know what really goes on in fraternity. You don't actually find out until the 33rd degree what you've been really doing. Never mind that you can get, you know, 27 degrees in 1 or 2 days, and that's supposed to make like a huge difference in your life, you know, just getting bombarded by degrees. But it's the idea that, you know, just that 1 degree can make such a big difference. You know, you get this one honorary degree, and all of a sudden everything just comes around full circle, and you leave like this totally different person. It's just, it's so absurd to me. It's I can't even put it in words, like the idiocy behind that.
Well, well, sorry to correct you. It's not the 33rd degree. It's the 180th degree, 360th.
Yeah,
They keep
I've
going
seen some people say that before too. It's gosh, I don't.
And I love it because I love conspiracy theories with being an Orthodox Jew and a Freemason. I
Mhm.
have control over the government and the economy.
Yeah, you just
Apparently.
run everything, don't you?
If that's true, then why did I get my community college? Why did I go to community college to get my associate's degree and I'm at UTD? If I had control over the economy and the government, I'd be at Harvard or Yale right now on the free ride.
You'd be running Harvard, right? I mean,
Apparently.
isn't that how it works? Yeah, I I have run into my fair share of nuts, and it used to kind of bother me, and then it kind of offended me. But like, I see the stuff on YouTube, like the comments, and I find them amusing. I just, you know, the people like that on the line are harmless, but there are people that hate the fraternity, that hate the Freemasons, that would actually kind of like to see us hurt, you know, physically, you know, physical harm come to us. And so that's why I'm always kind of low key about it, because 99.999% of those guys, you know, they're just going to flip you off, and you know you know they're not going to do anything. But it's that 1%, that 0.001% that I don't want to run into. I don't want to risk it.
Right.
So I wanted to ask. You said you've been a Mason for 6 years, right?
6 years, and I've held about 4 offices or 5 offices. Yeah, 5.
5 offices. And so you're 32.
I'm 32 years old, and I'm also a 32nd degree.
Oh, there
So
you go. So there you
yeah,
go. Illuminati right there.
yeah, and I already paid off my dues this year for my scholarship right for the rest of my life. So I'm a lifetime member.
Man, man. So you were 26 when you first stepped into the lodge then,
Physically 26,
physically 26.
mentally about 18.
Man, I was probably mentally 8 when I got mine. But so what I wanted to get, what I was getting to is compared to the rest of the membership at that time, how did you compare to them age-wise?
I was actually the youngest one in Lodge.
I thought
And
so.
yeah, so I was the youngest one, and so I was like a kid,
Mhm.
literally and physically, and everyone was just a lot older, either like double or triple my age, and it was they just love seeing. Of course, in lodges, we all love seeing new members,
Mhm.
and it's not just new people; it's energetic new people. And when I joined, I of course, you have to do the Q&A after you get your degree.
Mhm.
And I work 3-4 times a week with members from my lodge. And since I have a bar with pool tables and darts, there were actually pool players and dart players who had their A certificate or B certificate who helped me. So they would come over and we would play darts, shoot pool, do the whole Q&A, even have dinner
Mhm.
with uh maybe drinking some whiskey or scotch while going over that. Of course, my dad was there, so he sat down and he got to remember certain stuff. And I was actually got my fellow craft in about no, 2.5 months, I think. I got my fellow craft,
Very nice. It's good.
or a month and a half. I don't know. I've slept and drank since then. And then I was okay, a month and a half because I was raised in less than 3 months.
Okay.
And
Wow.
dad at that time, he was raised in 1969. He was raised in 3 months. So I told him I beat him, and he said, "Well, they changed the rules, so technically he beat me." So we went back and forth on that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, um, how did you feel when you finally got in? So, I assume when you came in, you could still sit in the meetings as an EA or fellow craft, right?
Yeah, they
Okay.
actually I sat in each state meeting as 1 degree.
Okay. All right. So, based off your preconceived notions, kind of your expectations, how did reality compare with that?
What do you mean?
So, whenever someone thinks about the Freemasons when they're looking to join, they have certain ideas of probably what it's like and kind of ideas of what to expect once they get in. And
Oh, you hear the cool stuff.
yeah.
I joined because I wanted a social atmosphere. I
Mhm.
wanted friends. I wanted to just expand as an introvert. I just wanted to be around people who I was never in the Greek fraternity. I was never a popular kid,
Mhm.
but I had this chance to join an organization my dad was part of that I check marked all the prerequisites. So I didn't learn about the charity first.
Mhm.
I learned about the charitable Carter Blood Care and the hospitals later.
Mhm.
I went in just as a friendship. So just meeting the brothers was just nice and enjoyable, just being around them. And you could get different um, aspects of life from different people.
Yes, absolutely. So you were really attracted to the brotherhood aspect of everything
Yeah.
then. That's very
Yeah.
cool. That's very good. And that's interesting you say you're an introvert. So did that did being introverted coming into the fraternity, do you feel as though you've grown in that aspect?
I've grown through other means.
Oh, yeah.
I being in the brotherhood hasn't changed one way or another.
Hmm.
It hasn't swayed me more extrovert or introverted. I grew up as a completely introverted person that used to be able to stay home for a whole week and not go out and be okay. As long as I had my N64 and all my Pokemon games, I was completely covered.
Yeah.
Now I now I walk outside just for fresh air, even when it's snowing. I like have to get out.
Hmm.
So just being around the brotherhood doesn't really change it, but it added a whole new aspect of you can be involved and you're welcome.
Yeah. I was just curious because I'm also very introverted, which you
Mhm.
probably wouldn't think since I'm very outspoken about the fraternity and things like that. In high school, I was also not very popular, and I also was super quiet. Like I didn't talk at all, right? And going into the fraternity, um, I was still pretty introverted, right?
Mhm.
But I would be asked from time to time to just kind of fill in for the officers, and so I learned the part, and I'd be a little nervous, one or two sentences like, oh man, this is really kind of making me nervous, and then I'd do it, and then you just kind of grow in that aspect. Then before you know it, you're doing another office, and then you look back and like, when did I start talking so much? So I didn't know if that had the same effect on you, or maybe like you said, you did other things, but
It kind of if now that I look at it, as someone who are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs?
uh remind me what that is. It
The
sounds familiar.
four letters,
Oh, the
like
personality test.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've always done that since I was in middle school, and I'm always an INFJ,
Hmm.
less than 1% or 2% or whatever the population. But I'm also severely ADD, ADHD, or something. I wasn't paying attention when they told me.
Yeah,
So I talk a lot, but I'm also an introvert.
I
So I'm
understand.
an oxymoron. So actually being in lodge made me kind of calm down when I have to be.
Hmm.
Even though I talked fast and I did my memory work for my fellow craft in like less than 5 minutes because
Hmm.
I was just rambling. Um, but it just made me calm down. And I had to almost stop and be like, okay, they have to talk. I get to talk in certain areas, but being a chaplain, my last officer actually made me really scared
Was that?
because you have to talk, and I don't mind talking, but also my lodge is very particular on everyone seems to memorize their roles by the back of their hand,
Hmm.
and I didn't memorize the prayers. And as an Orthodox in Judaism, all of our prayers are structured; they're not improvised. So I kind of tried making it like memorizing them, but I almost had to stop and read out, and it was tough. But
See.
my highest regards to people who are chaplains now.
So that brings up kind of the one of the big things I wanted to sort of ask about. Actually, I have another thing. You have to remind me if I forget. Let me write it down real quick. But being Jewish, tell me kind of, you're obviously going to have had a different, probably Masonic, the same journey, but I guess maybe a little bit different experience. Uh,
Mhm,
just from having a different um, perspective on everything.
mhm.
So I just wanted to ask you about that. Kind of, how do you feel that your background as being Jewish, how do you feel as though that has impacted your Masonic journey so far?
Excellent question. I would say there's been ups and downs.
Hmm.
The the up is that you stand out like a sore thumb. And while everyone else is Christian, they go to First Methodist, First Baptist, all these churches, you're Jewish. So if they don't know, everyone has heard about Jews. I mean, we've all seen Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments or The Prince of Egypt.
Hmm.
I prefer The Prince of Egypt. Or the Rugrats Passover and Hanukkah specials. But we watch them every year. Of course, they're going to, luckily, my lodge actually has a Jewish Tanakh, a Jewish Bible
Hmm.
that I got to be sworn on. And it's a great one. It's actually the company's out of print. But it was interesting because they're like, okay, we can't have the Christian Bible. Luckily, we have a Jewish one. And then you get asked questions like Hanukkah and all this stuff because they will meet other Jews who are Masons,
Hmm.
but for someone who's grown in the Orthodox, grew up Reformed and became Orthodox, they're like asking me like different stuff like, oh, you can't go Saturday, and if you observe the Sabbath, because that's Friday night to Saturday night, you can't do anything on Saturday. Oh, so interesting. But when I did stop being an observant Orthodox Jew, once a Jew, always a Jew, for people who don't know, Scottish Rite, they do everything on Saturdays. All their degrees are on Saturdays.
Yeah.
When I
That
was
makes sense.
not Orthodox, when I was not observing the Sabbath, I got to go and see the Scottish Rite and get my degrees. And then I realized, wait, I won't be, once I start keeping the Sabbath again, I won't be able to finish them and see all of the degrees. Unless I visit another state that does the degrees on other days. To this day, I still would like them to do a Sunday stuff, but I know they won't. So being Jewish on that aspect of participating is an issue at times.
I see.
But I can't force Masonry to adapt to the minority of minorities of minorities. But I did actually reach out to look up on Facebook. Thank God for social media. Imagine if MySpace was still around. But I looked on, and I was thinking, is there a Jewish Masons group? And I found two. I found one group called Jewish Freemasons with an apostrophe S. And I was like, the spelling's a little off, but they're also Jewish Masons. And then I found a group called Orthodox Jewish Mason, and I joined both of them. And then I started my group called Jewish Freemasons with no apostrophe S. And I became close friends with the guy who started Orthodox Jewish Mason, Shlomo. We became good friends, and I also advertised my group on other pages. And it started as Texas Jewish Freemasons. And I started allowing other Masons from different states and countries, Israel, Australia, Netherlands, all these others, I changed it to Jewish Freemasons. And I've started doing Zoom meetings with Shlomo from Orthodox Jewish Mason. And we've been doing Jewish Masonic talks every week.
Very interesting.
Really cool to talk about, like today, Psalm 133. Seeing the Jewish aspect, we had a brother give a whole talk on that. I actually got to meet a rabbi who lives in Australia, who's a Mason, and he gave a talk on King Solomon's Temple.
Wow.
That was great. We had about 14 brothers tune in on that.
That's really good.
And thank God for him, because it was like 9:30 in the morning for him, and it was 6 p.m. in Texas time, which is, of course, standard time.
Yeah. Is that a group or a page?
It's a group.
How many people would you say you have in your group now?
212 and counting.
And how many of them, you told me something interesting about those statistics. So how many of them would you say are from different, like what country would you think the most of them are from?
America.
Okay.
And like Shlomo, who does his Orthodox Jewish Mason, his is only for Orthodox Jewish Mason. I cater to Jewish Masons who are Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, or twice a year Jews, which is going Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we cater to different backgrounds, but Shlomo and I are both what you would consider Orthodox, but we always collaborate every week to give a talk, and it's a great thing. Like, I gave a talk on just conspiracy theories of Jewish and Freemasons, and we talked for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And we would talk about different things. Like, Shlomo gave a virtual tour of the Grand Lodge in New York, which was really cool to see. We talked about different aprons, and it's just having brothers who are in the same faith together.
Yeah.
And when I advertised originally on other groups, of course there was a debate. Why should you have a group where you should only be of the same faith, because the big machlokus, which is Yiddish for debate, is Masons are not supposed to talk religion.
Mm-hmm.
But the argument on the other opposing side is if you have a group and you're catering to certain types of Masons that feel kind of left out,
Yeah.
Muslim, Catholic, Jewish, Black Masons who are not Prince Hall,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay because you're kind of catering to a niche within a niche. And there were some Masons who felt kind of left out. But we all talked
They
and
felt left out. There's literally countless other groups that can join if they felt left out because they weren't in the Jewish conversations.
and like my questions whenever you join Masonic groups, there's always questions they ask you before you join.
Mm-hmm.
What lodge, or what's the symbol for the Master Mason degree, stuff like that.
Yeah.
For Jewish Masonic groups, we ask Jewish questions and Masonic questions to make sure you're both.
I see.
And probably every quarter of a year, I'll get 2 or 3 who are part of that Illuminati. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of affiliated lodges?
Yeah.
There's been some conversation about it. So like for those that don't know that are watching this, some countries, some jurisdictions, they have, I'm pretty sure they call like affiliate lodges, and that's lodges for people with common backgrounds. You know, so there might be a college lodge where it's on a campus and you have to be in that college to go there, or there might be like for police officers, there might be a lodge just for police officers. And of course here in Texas they don't necessarily like that idea. But really I don't see any harm in that. You're not even talking about lodge, you're just talking about a group. So
I'm just
why
a group.
yeah, why would that be? People, you have brothers with a common experience, you know, common background, a common faith, and what's the harm in them getting together and discussing Freemasonry through that perspective?
Because other people who are not Jewish want to hear from the Jewish, like they love the esotericism.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people love about Masonry.
Mm-hmm.
They love diving deep in Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall, all these other esotericism, and get into the gist of like the Kabbalistic. But the thing is, in Judaism, whether you know Hebrew or not, most Jews can read Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And we can understand it through the natural script. And people get, excuse my language, pissed off
Mm-hmm.
if we don't share that information, or they have to read it on themselves.
See, that's actually something I wanted to ask you about. Is I have tried numerous times to study Kabbalah, but there is that barrier. You know, it's from a very Hebrew background, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and unless you have some basic familiarity with it, I mean, of course, I know that there's like people have looked at it like in Christian lenses, and there's a kind of a Muslim perspective on it and everything, but you still have that source, you know, the Hebrew source behind it. And so I didn't know if you had any interest in esoteric or anything like that, or if you had studied Kabbalah or anything of the sort, and if it had maybe you didn't experience that. So I know it's a very deep topic. I mean, for anybody, even people familiar with the Hebrew language, is probably, you know, it's still a rabbit hole that takes, you know, years to dive into. But
Took the words out of my mouth.
oh, I just didn't know if you had studied it at all or had any interest in that.
So originally in Kabbalistic aspect, you have to be 40 years old, know Chumash, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Mishnah, Gemara, Midrashim, from all that.
Mm-hmm.
40 years old and have 2 kids, a male and a female, boy and a girl. But the thing is, you can know the Bible. Like, we all know, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bereshit bara Elohim, the beginning words of the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know all that. You have to know Mishnah, Gemara, all that, which is the Talmud, which is the oral Torah, which is 42 tractates, I want to say.
So when you say know it, you mean you had to have it
You
Memorize?
have to not memorize. You have to know it to the point that you can debate it,
I see.
and then you can dive deeper into Kabbalah. Now, what is Kabbalah? Kabbalah means to receive.
Mm-hmm.
Kabbalah is Hebrew to receive. Now, the thing is, there's more to it than just. Of course, every Jew learns a little Kabbalah because that's what gets us to learn more if we're not observant.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an old proverb, not proverb, more of a saying that when people learn Kabbalah and they don't know typical Torah, they go crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the risk that a lot of people don't realize. That you can look up Kabbalist texts from different rabbis who wrote in English. I mean, I can tell you, Rabbi R.A. Kaplan. He's he's written many books. He's written the Sefer Yesera, uh, all these other Kabbalistic books, but he gives it such a simple format that if you don't know what he's talking about, you get excited. But if you know what he's talking about, you learned it. You already can understand it deeper than the typical non-Jew,
Yeah.
and it's a risky journey that some people take.
That's interesting. And I could see why it would, why it would affect your mind like that. But it's not just Kabbalah, but there's other, I guess, inner teachings around the world where you hear something similar. Basically, if you're not ready for it, it will have a negative impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to me that you say that.
Yeah, and
So
that's why for any listeners right now, if you want to learn Kabbalah and you're not Jewish, you can get the books, but you probably may or may not understand it.
mhm.
I can't advise against it or for it because we all have free will. What I can say is Jews who know Kabbalah will not teach you Kabbalah because you're not Jewish. I don't want to get into the whole rabbit hole and the whole deal of why not, because that's a whole journey and talk that's outside this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to learn esotericism, there's books about it, but just be careful. Just be careful. That's all I'm going to say.
I think with things like what we're discussing, even if you had the most learned rabbi, the just whoever. See, I don't know who you'd even say like the top has ever been like as far as Kabbalah goes, but even if you had them in this conversation and they were just to tell you like the most divine truth they'd ever discovered, no one would know what he's talking about. No one would understand,
Right.
and it's the same thing. It's the same thing with Freemasonry, in my opinion, is that, the true secrets of Freemasonry, you can't share. And the reason isn't because it's like a secret or anything. It's some truths have no meaning until you discover it yourself, until you get to that point where you understand it. So even if you knew like, the most sobering truth that anyone had ever spoken, if no one's ready for it, it doesn't matter. It's just going to fall on deaf ears.
Right. And you said something great, that even if you understand it, even if you learned it, it doesn't mean anything until you actually understand it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Where your actions walk like a plum.
Mm-hmm.
We all can be told that, but it doesn't mean anything. It means Jack Schnitzel until you actually learn it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what's true.
That even falls back. That even applies. You mentioned that you went through your degrees relatively quickly. You learned to work pretty fast. And I don't
was
know.
advised against it.
Do what now?
I was advised against it originally.
Oh, yeah? See, nobody advised me, and I went through it, I think maybe a month later, longer than you. I mean, I wouldn't, but I had some good teachers around me also. But at that point, when you go that quickly, you're just learning words at that point.
Right.
It's you're not necessarily embodying that in yourself. You're not necessarily growing from just learning the words. And so it's kind of the same idea, I think, in that until you actually learn what you're saying, until you actually meditate and reflect, what does this actually mean? How does this apply to me? You're just memorizing words. Anybody can memorize words, but and that's what I think really differentiates the members from the Masons, because you have lots of members out there and they can memorize the words, but the Masons are the ones that are actually bringing that into themselves. They're actually growing from what they're learning.
And I would consider myself one of the members. And I, of course, as a Mason, but there's times that I don't feel like I'm acting like a Mason when I should. And you're right. And you said that people memorize the words. And not to get on a tangent on the religious aspect, but we all go to synagogue, church, mosque, whatever. We're reading out of a scripture book. Mm-hmm. We're reading the words. How many times do we actually take the words and internalize them and act upon the words?
I think the fact that you contemplate that means you need to give yourself more credit than you do.
I mean, we can read commentary on our prayers. Mm-hmm. And there's books and books and books upon commentary. And there's times that, and I'm going to say one thing that's a little Kabbalistic, that Rabbi Ari Kaplan wrote in Jewish Meditation that actually the old sages, the old Kabbalists, the old mystics, mm-hmm. to pray the Shemona Esrei, which is the Amida, which is 18 now, 9, well, it's 19 prayers, but Amida, Shemona Esrei is 18 in Hebrew. The main lengthy prayer in Judaism, and it would take them, they would take 7 minutes for every word, because every word is a powerful within itself.
How do you say one word 7 minutes long?
You say the word, but you wait around 7 minutes until you say the next one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he said, if you can't do that, you do 7 minutes for each prayer. And you break that down, and people would do that. Now, just imagine a prayer that you say every day. Even thank you, God, for letting me live. Mm-hmm. Imagine just breaking that down. Thank you. Stop, internalize it. Thank you, God, the great architect of the universe, for making me of all people. I woke up this morning. I could have died in my sleep, but I'm awake today. Live. A simple thank you prayer can mean so much. And now imagine if that prayer times 20, and you have like 20 more of those prayers that you're saying every day. You can stop and think. In Judaism, we have a prayer before we drink water, before we eat. And I actually had, when I went to yeshiva in Israel, I met a great guy. He's actually from South Africa, so I loved his accent because, I mean, Americans have the worst accents ever. I'm from Texas, y'all. And he actually said, I said a bracha, a prayer, for a bagel. And he goes, stop. Think about what you're saying. And he broke down each thing, and it just meant a lot. Mm-hmm. So we all can stumble through our prayers when we go to church on Sundays, synagogues on Friday night, Saturday, mosques on Friday. But we need to stop and think on the prayers. And as a past chaplain of my lodge, I actually now can look back and wish I would have taken my time to say the prayers, even the same prayers that we say every month for state meeting. Mm-hmm. Broke that down and think and like thank you for letting us be here. Because we're all driving to Lodge. How many people get into car wrecks every day? But we actually got to be at our lodge to be there. Just being at the destination, we should say a prayer like, thank you. And in Masonry, we're taught before any great undertaking, thank the Supreme Architect.
Mm-hmm.
And as a religious person, I think we need to think about that and go back to and thank God for letting us live and say a prayer when we wake up. Thank you for letting me wake up this morning. Just
I
one of
like
those.
that. No, I like that a lot. I do. And you know, I was raised Baptist, and so growing up, young, going to Bible schools on Sunday, on during the summers and stuff, it's not unusual, from an early age, here you got to learn the Lord's Prayer, learn this, and even in like commandery, we still use that a lot. But those words are significant in that prayer, right? There is meaning to that prayer, but when you learn it, and it's just part of something you learn growing up, and you recite it, you could recite the whole thing, and I've been guilty of it, because I usually try to recite it like when I'm going to work and stuff,
Yeah.
and I could recite the whole thing driving without really knowing I'm done. I could start it and just say it, but those are just empty words at that point.
You're
you know
saying that wrote.
yeah, you're just saying it rote. But so I try to be mindful of what I'm saying, by the same mentality, because you're just doing lip service if you're not paying attention to what you're saying. If you're not actually, to me, like, I like to visualize the things I'm thankful for, the things I'm talking about. And there's so many things like that, even outside of prayer, and in the fraternity, the words in the ritual and in the degrees, they're powerful. They have meaning. They're important, and often we're guilty of just learning it and just going through the motions. But to me, every degree, every time we hear an obligation, that's an opportunity for us to reflect on our own obligations. There was a brother that I was talking to in a separate thing I do, and he was talking, I think he's in Alabama or South Dakota, and he was saying, when everyone's taking the obligation in the degrees, everyone else stands up and places their hand over their heart, and which we don't do in Texas, right?
No.
And he was saying, the reason that they do that is because they're all retaking that same obligation, because not only is that guy obligating himself to the fraternity, but we are obligating ourselves to that brother as well. And so the words have power. The words are important. And when we just zone out, when we're just on our phones, we're not tuned in like we need to be. And that applies to so many things, even as a Freemason, as a Christian or a Jew, or even as like a parent, it's important that we're there, mentally, and focusing on what we're doing. But I also want to say, when you said, sometimes you feel like just a member, and truthfully, I don't always feel like I'm the best Freemason I can be. I don't always feel like I'm the best father I can be, or the best, anything, any role. I often feel as though, am I really holding myself to that standard that I try to? And I think that's what separates the people that are stagnant in their different roles in life, and people that are growing. So I don't think a member, but based off the definition we talked about earlier, would ever really give that a whole lot of thought. Am I really being the best Mason that I can? Am I really growing? Because those thoughts by themselves give way to growth.
And with being one of the questions that Masons ask new potential recruits, not recruits. Yeah, it's a horrible word. Visitors.
There you go. Sure.
Are you of age? Do you believe in a higher power? And do you have free will?
Mhm.
Now, of age, yeah. Are you physically of age? Like I said, I was 26 then. I was 18 mentally, but I still check mark both boxes.
Mhm.
Do you believe in higher power? You got to think about that. We, every day, as a Mason, we are waking up and we're thinking, am I being the best uh, theological self? Am I being the best Freemason?
Mhm.
It's not just, if you're not Freemason, then you're just you're just being the best theological person. Mason, you're covering two bases.
Mhm.
We should almost work twice as hard to be the best Baptist, the best Jew, the best Methodist, Protestant, and also Freemason. And that's something that we all need to think about. And I'm guilty myself, you're guilty, every brother's guilty.
Mhm.
But we always have to work towards being the better person.
Yes. That's what
And
it's all about, isn't it?
yeah, and we all make mistakes. I mean, before when to get on the tangent, you heard my EA degree story.
Mhm.
Um and it's okay if I say this right now,
Yeah,
right?
go ahead. It's fine.
Okay, so this is so I still get shit based on this. So in the changing room, I was in the changing room and the brother said, "Okay, get undressed to change into the outfit." And I told him, "So there's a little problem here." And this guy, Brother Livingston, is very well known in Texas Freemasonry. He was my master of ceremonies, and he was like, "Wait, can you explain that?" And I said, "So you might want to step out of this room." And he was like, "Oh, no, no, no." He walked out. I later was informed my dad heard because he was there for my initiation. So without saying too much, I freeballed my EA degree. And to this day, we keep telling every new recruit, new EA to please wear underwear.
And so did they throw out the what they got, like the sweatpants or whatever? They throw those out after?
No, actually, they took them to the laundromat.
Man.
You need to get new clothes, but yeah, to this day, 6 years later, I still get ridiculed for that, and I'm okay with that. Every time I tell that story, I've told that to other people, and to this day, yeah, every EA has to wear underwear. They're
So
reminded is a better answer.
there's two jokes that always go around with the EA. One of them usually has to do with the goat jokes, and I don't like the goat jokes at all. But I don't have a problem with the joke telling them to wear clean underwear for that reason.
Yeah. And my dad was there before he passed away, and he was actually there for my raising. He raised me, um, and he said, "Sean, why didn't why did he not wear underwear?" And I told him, "Nobody told me that I'm going to be changing clothes."
Mhm.
So I was informed of that.
Oh man, yeah. Well, as long as you didn't make the same mistake for your fellow crafty and your masters, I guess it's.
Oh no, I did not make the same mistake. Thank God.
Oh, that's funny though, man.
For anyone listening, I mean, you're probably still laughing overhearing that.
Oh gosh. Um. So with that said, we're getting pretty close to an hour now.
Yeah.
I do enjoy this conversation, but I know
Hey.
we want to be respectful of your time and everything. Real quick, do you want to just quick reminder, what is the name of your group for any I know you only admit Jewish brothers to it, but if we have
Yeah,
any, do you want to throw that out?
absolutely. Jewish Freemasons. The cover photo is you'll see Tanakh, English and Hebrew on one side with the square and compasses, and um, you'll be asked 3 questions. They're pretty simple ones if you're Jewish and a Mason. Um, and yeah, and we do weekly Zoom meetings with brothers around the world, and we'll just enjoy talking, getting to know everyone, and it's growing, and I'm appreciative of all the brothers who participate and act upon it.
That's very cool. I'll also mention, I don't always remember to mention this, but since we're talking about Facebook groups, if you don't follow Masonic Improvement on Facebook, we do have a page, lots of content on there that it's not quite YouTube worthy, but it's still interesting. So if you don't follow me on Facebook, be sure that you give the page a like so you can keep up. I also post all my new content on there. So if you want to just kind of stay in the loop, that's a good way to do so. Brother Rothberg, it was a pleasure speaking with you tonight. And I do hope we can have another conversation sometime in the future, because I feel as though this has been very informative.
I'd be more than welcome and love to have another conversation, Brother Jones.
Great. Do you have anything you want to add or anything you'll say before we shut her down for the night?
Just remember, before undergoing any great and audible undertaking, always invoke the aid of deity.
There you go, brother. Thank you again. And I will look forward to our next conversation. Take care, brother.
You too.